Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we're going to be talking Retribution Paladin feedback, and it's going to be a little bit different than normal. We're going to be taking a forum post made by Bolas, who is the head of the Retribution Paladin Discord, and he writes the Wowhead guys. I give him a lot of shoutouts on this channel. He, when I first started playing Ret Paladin, his written guide is actually what got me on the right track because I could not find any good video guides. So, we're going to be taking his feedback, and I read through it already. It's very good feedback. I agree with pretty much all of it. And why am I doing this? Because I do know that there are people at Blizzard that are aware of my channel, and so maybe, you know, this could help get the feedback to the proper places. Who knows? That there's no guarantee on that, but I figured I'd do my best to help out here because a lot of these things are very very pertinent, and this comes from, you know, the place of the Retribution Paladin Discord, which, like all Discord servers, can be a little bit toxic and stuff. It's not anything against Ret Paladin specifically. Some are way worse than Ret Paladin, frankly, like way worse. So I don't mingle a lot in there, but I do go through and read it at times. And this is on the Blizzard forums. This happens to be on the Blizzard forums, but I think it's very good. And I wanted to go over it and also give my own commentary with it as well. So now that we have that whole setup out of the way, first, we're going to read through his feedback on Ret Paladin in general. Then we're going to do the tier sets. So I finally have gotten all back on the PTR with the bug fixes. I've already mentioned on the channel that the tuning is likely needs to be tuned up, but I think he makes points that are better than just the damage points themselves. So Red's looking to be one of the lowest damage specializations in the game. Needs large buffs. Okay, that's fair. Going from live to 11.2. Biggest immediate change is the nerf to Divine Hammer. Players can expect to lose damage somewhere between the region of 7% on single target and 11% on AoE with this single change. There's been no compensation buffs to account for this nerf. So this is important. And the way Bolas says it here, it's very accurate and very like factual and giving numbers. But what I think needs to be said here is basically in 11.1, Divine Hammer got changed, and it had a very good interaction with the Templar hero talent. And because of this, it performs just amazingly, and it just synergizes. And if you keep your Divine Hammer up, you just have all this extra damage to play with. And basically, Ret was a little bit behind on damage going into 11.1, but this incredibly strong talent basically was our buff. Okay, so this incredibly strong talent that's like in the middle of our talent tree was like a buff to us, and it allowed us to compete, say, middle of the pack in raid or higher, and be right on the cusp of meta in Mythic Plus. And this got changed from a 1 minute cooldown to a 2 minute cooldown, and it's harder to keep it up now. The amount, the seconds, the decimal seconds that you get per, you know, spender or whatever per everything is lower, and so it's harder to keep up now. You don't keep it up. You don't have 100% uptime anymore, or even really close to that, compared to 11.1. And so this talent did kind of need nerfed, right? And we let's take a look at it real quick. So this talent is right here. It's Divine Hammer. It's out 2 minute cooldown. For the spot on the tree, that is way too much power, right? He said 7% single target just from nerfing it. It's not even removed, and 11% multi-target, right? And so that's a huge power spike for a talent that's sitting right here. This talent would need to be like a capstone, right, to even, you know, warrant that kind of power, I guess. But, you know, and so I understand the nerf of it, but then what he said about the compensatory nerf or buffs is exactly what's the problem is, right? So the reason why we were competitive and decent in 11.1 was because of Divine Hammer and the interaction with Templar. Without that, we just got a huge nerf with no buffs to compensate for that. And so this is a very important piece, and this is like the number one thing. So this needs addressed in some way, whether that's buffing, single target. I will say this, in AoE and Mythic Plus, we're still pretty decent, even after this change. It's single target where it's very heavy and very noticeable. And, you know, there's also people that just like the Divine Hammer playstyle. That's not what this is about. Some people just want to play the Divine Hammer with a little bit of skill expression. Some people didn't like that I found out on my channel, right? Some people don't like having to try to keep that up. So, you know, it's not about debating whether the talent should go back to the way it was. It's just that the damage is very low because this talent was so overperforming. So the desire to remove Divine Hammer as a permanent maintenance buff makes some sense, given that sometimes difficult, less skilled players to maintain. Even though this was the only meaningful form of skill expression for that rat had. The rat needs compensation for this loss regardless. That's basically what I just talked about. I posted more specific feedback in the tier set thread, but Red's tier sets are also not significant damage increases. Yeah, we'll talk about that more. He does get into some numbers though on this other post. Some bonuses have 30, 40, or even 50% damage increases, which are more than 7 times as powerful as some of Retribution's available bonuses. This is extreme discrepancy and only will cause already severely nerfed Rat Paladin to continue to fall further and further back. A 3% aura buff is not going to be sufficient to bring her up to standard. Well, clearly, if you lost 7%, then that's not going to happen. This part here, this is a good point too, and I understand why. And I'm going to give some context to the viewers here of why I think this happens. As an aside, it's incredibly frustrating as a Ret player to constantly be nerfed under tune when the content goes live, and to only get enough buffs to be considered competitive weeks or months into a patch. It's a running joke at this point among Ret players that Ret is almost always awful during early progression, but it's always seen by the player base at large as a strong spec because it ends up doing well by the end of the tier. Based on current tuning, this tier looks to follow the exact same path. So I do think there's a lot of caution on Blizzard's end of making sure that Ret isn't like the top damage, because there's so much cheese you could do. And I know Ret players don't want to hear this, but there's so much cheese you can do if Ret is also like the top damage, and it's like the top damage by far, because we can literally DPS while we immune, we can bubble sack, we can do so many things that and I know I just named 2 things, right? But there's like so many like weird little niche things you can do that if you could warrant to bring 5 or 10 Ret Paladins to your raid, it would just completely break things. And so I think they are always cautious, and maybe it's over cautious going into a tier to make sure Ret and other specs similar to that. You also typically don't see Shaman being so overpowered that you want to bring like 5 of them because they can all onk up, right? And then that allows for game breaking things. And so I that's probably, I don't work for Blizzard, but that's probably what their end is trying to be cautious about it and then like slowly tuning up throughout the patch. But I agree, it is awful to start off so bad and then slowly get put back into the correct area. But I will say we're not that far off in Mythic Plus. It's just mostly the single target and raid, and a lot of the stuff from the Ret Discord, that community of Ret really focuses a lot on the single target and the prio damage, which is very important, of course, but it's definitely true in those cases, right? And so I wanted to give the context to that. And now let's go through the tier sets as well. So let's go through his feedback. Again, this is from Bolas. Feedback for the Retribution sets: Templar and Herald, the Sun PvE, Contact, Rating, and Mythic Plus. So he first gives the things posted by community manager Linksy and about like what the expectation is for the tier sets, and then he just gives like his rebuttal to like what is actually happening. So for season 3 of the War Within, we want to seize the opportunity to put a spotlight on the expansion's core combat system of hero talents by introducing class sets, put additional twists on the experiences they provide. We expect these bonuses to have a moderate to significant impact on combat gameplay by providing noticeable effect and results in a user experience that differs from previous seasons when a player unlocks the full set. So Bolas says, if the design goal is to moderate significant impact on combat gameplay, the Herald set does not accomplish this at all. It has no impact on gameplay. So what the Herald set does is it basically is just a it's just like a complete passive, right? It's your dot basically. The High Boast is passive damage increase, has no component that could ever alter gameplay, and the playstyle will be exactly the same as those previous seasons. This is completely correct, and I'll say too, the Templar one does alter gameplay, but it alters it almost in a bad way, because it feels really bad to build up to 5, use your Hammer of Light, and then have to build up to 5 again and use a Hammer of Light again. It just feels terrible, because to get to that 5 for the Hammer of Light, you're usually using your Wake of Ashes, which gives you 3 of that 5, right? So it's only 2 buttons a lot of times. And, yeah, it's most of the time just 2 buttons that you're pressing to get there. And so, yeah, instead of having to press 3 or, never 4 really, but 2 or 3 buttons if you get the auto attack in there, it's just a big difference, right? It feels bad. Is all it really is. It just feels bad. And because one of the buttons isn't Wake of Ashes, which feels amazing to press. The gameplay impact of character power offered by these class set bonuses are intended to be more pronounced than previous 2 seasons. They may significantly modify existing ability or effect, generate significant resources, or potentially influence talent selections. And then Bolas says the gameplay impact for Season 3 tier sets is considerably less than it was for Season 2 for Retribution. That's very true. Both Templar and Herald. The character power gain is also definitely not more pronounced than previous seasons. Yet, as he mentioned in the other post, very low damage as well in the tier set. Playing with these bonuses providing feedback. We consider the flow testing, feedback panel design. Neither set bonus for Retribution, Templar, or Herald of the Sun has a higher level of impact than those of previous seasons. Both bonuses have too small of an impact, gameplay, and power. Okay, he mentions the 5 holy power thing here. Having to generate 5 holy power again for the hard cast Hammer of Light without the generation from Wake of Ashes you have with first cast feels really bad. Agreed. The Herald set has a big bug with Sun's Avatar. Occasional effect will stop working for a prolonged period of time despite Dawnlight and other Avenging Wrath, Crusader, Solar Wrath being active. The 4 set bonus is barely a damage increase. It's a low 25% uptime on 50% damage buff to an ability that contributes 25% of your damage on a single target. That's a lot of numbers, but just to say, this isn't doing much. Extra Dawn Lights are not useful for Retribution in a single target since we are effectively capped on duration due to Radiant Glory. Yes, so when I first read this, I thought the extra Dawn Lights were going to go on the single target, but they don't. So this is only made for healers. This set is, you can just straight up say it. The Herald of the Sun tier set was only made for healers. It wasn't ever even considered for red. So that's an issue. Templar. 2 set bonus here. Oh, so this is just the Templar set bonuses. The range of, this is important. I've mentioned this on another video as well. The range of damage for Hammer of Light is very small around your target. So the strike 3 additional secondary targets effect will usually not actually cause any extra targets to be hit unless they're directly underneath the primary target. I mentioned in the other video, you almost have to have Gorfine's Grasp and stack everything up, pixel stack to hit everything. The additional stack generation from the 2 set bonus is equivalent to only 1 Hammer of Light cast every 2 minutes. Even after acquiring the set bonus, the Retribution Paladin will have fewer Light's Deliverance procs than they do live in Season 2 due to the Divine Hammer nerf. If it's a goal to make set bonus to provide a significant positive impact to gameplay and damage, neither of these bonuses provide either of those in their current state. I 100% agree. And we come back to this Divine Hammer nerf. So basically, just to kind of wrap this up, and that feedback was very important in my opinion, but to wrap this up, Divine Hammer being so strong in 11.1 is really killing us here in 11.2 when it gets nerfed. I'm not even saying you should go back to the, I like it personally. I think it's fine, at least. You know, I could take it or leave it, but I like it enough the way it used to be. But I'm fine just leaving it 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be Divine Hammer doesn't have to be this completely game altering ability or whatever. We don't have to have that. But the amount of damage that we are losing because of this, I think, is just not maybe even understood. And if it's not known, I know it's been reported everywhere, so they have to know this. But the Divine Hammer hits were counting as Light's Deliverance stacks, and that's why we were getting more Hammer of Lights. So without Divine Hammer being active all the time and getting Light's Deliverance stacks to where we can do Hammer of Light more, even with the tier set trying to give us more Hammer of Lights, it's actually going to be less, which is what Bolas was just saying. And so, you know, that needs to be understood at just like how cascading of a damage loss it was. It's not just the fact of tuning the amount of damage it does and the duration that it lasts. It's the impact it was having on the Templar tree itself. And if the goal is to have us play Herald, then you should actually make a Herald tier set that does something for Retribution Paladins, first of all. If it doesn't do anything for single target, and that you're purposely nerfing the Templar one into the ground, then basically we have 2 hero talent specs and talent and tier sets, and neither of them make us feel good, do good, you know, perform well, have fun, none of that. And so that's very important. I was a little bit hyped about the tier sets when they first came out. After playing with the Hammer of Light one, it just feels awful to have to build up the 5 again. That's definitely true. It's cool when you do your 5, or if you have Divine Purpose proc or whatever, right? But like if you get to do like 3 in a row, that is cool. It does feel cool when that happens. Where your Light's Deliverance lines up with right after your first 2 that you do, and you can like Divine Purpose the second one or something like that. So you go literally Hammer of Light, Hammer of Light, Hammer of Light. Like that feels cool on the rare occasion that lines up. But other than that, it doesn't. That's about the only time it feels like really cool. And then and it's been stated, the Herald one's really just bad for single target. It's fine for AoE, but it's just really bad for single target. So hopefully these things get addressed. We are, you know, about a month out, and a lot of stuff would need addressed to make it fun. You could always slap a 10% aura buff on or something to ret. Instead of a 3% aura buff, you could slap like a 10% aura buff on. And maybe it wouldn't need to be that much, maybe like a 7 or 8% or something like that. But or I don't know if there's time left to make it fun or not, unfortunately. So that's where we are with this. It's not great after ret's been pretty good, and 11.1 was a highlight, with Divine Hammer kind of being the highlight of 11.1. 11.2 is looking pretty dismal at the moment for ret, but we have a month. Something could happen. Big damn, even an aura buff, people will be somewhat happy, even if it's not as fun. So, but our tier set's very underwhelming as well. Like I said, the Templar one, I see the vision of the Templar one, but for the Herald one, there's no vision for the single target of it. So that should definitely be addressed no matter what. You shouldn't lock us into one hero talent because you don't even bother to make a tier set for the other one that does anything, in my opinion. But because then it's like you're not even if you're only playing the game for fun and not for parsing, it's not fun to go do a single target boss and have your tier set not do anything. So yeah, so that'll be it for this one, guys. I'll be doing more on the PTR and more testing, but I read through that feedback and I really wanted to share it and give my own commentary on it as well, and hopefully get this stuff cleaned up for everybody going into 11.2. Retribution Paladin is one of the most played specs in the game, and so it's important that we try to get this right, in my opinion. So as always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot. If you're already a subscriber, I encourage you to check out the Patreon. Other than that, everybody, have a good one.